Advice. From the Journal of Abigail Hewitt from March 1978 to March 1979. Thursday, March 23rd, 1978. For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield is playing on the radio. Cameron is driving right now. I like it when Cam drives. He seems more like his old self when he's driving. The military changed my older brother, but when he's driving, he's a teenager again, and we're cruising up Main Street with the windows down. I can see a slight smile on the edge of his lips. I'm always nervous when I'm being driven around by someone else. I guess I have a hard time trusting people. That's what Natty says anyways. You're a control freak, Abby. You gotta trust other people sometimes, she says. Maybe she's right, but it's not true where Cam is concerned. I feel completely comfortable when he's driving. We're heading to Norris Lake for Easter weekend. It's a long drive, but this old panel van can take it. Natty is sleeping in the very back right now. She was up late last night, and I can tell she's nursing a hangover, poor dear. Mike and Shannon are in the back seats playing Thumb Wars. It's just an excuse for them to touch each other. They look happy to see each other. Since Mike went off to college, they only get to see each other about once every other month. They've been looking forward to this weekend since Christmas. They make each other happy. Shannon currently has her head on Mike's shoulder while they basically hold hands and twiddle their thumbs together. She's smiling contentedly, and so is Mike. I'm glad Dusty was wrong about them not being able to handle the long-distance thing. Oh, Dusty, what am I going to do with him? He's meeting us at the lake. It's his family's place we're staying at while we're there. I haven't seen him since we fought last weekend. I guess we're supposed to try to make up this weekend. I hope things don't get awkward. I only agreed to come for Cam. I really believe he needs this little vacation. We used to have so much fun playing at the lake as kids. I'm hoping this will bring his smile back. When Cam is happy, he's like the sun. He lights up everything around him. I miss that. We are pulling over to grab some drinks and gas. I'll write more tomorrow. Friday, March 24th, 1978. Down on the Corner by Creedence Clearwater Revival is playing on the radio. Natty and me are sitting by the lake listening to some music while everyone else is still swimming. It was definitely still weird between Dusty and me when we first got here yesterday. We barely spoke. I know he wanted to talk to me, but I just wasn't ready yet. I know he still wants to enlist, and he knows that I still don't want him to. What else was there to talk about? I slept with Natty on the living room floor last night. We had our sleeping bags and all the pillows from the couch, so we were comfortable. Dusty woke up this morning with coffee and donuts. Sneaky ass ran out to a place nearby and grabbed them before anyone else woke up. He knows me too well. How the hell am I going to be mad at him with hot coffee and warm donuts? We had a great morning. His plans for getting along is apparently to avoid the subject. He's probably got the right idea. If we talk about it, then we'll fight again, and I don't want to fight right now. I could tell our awkwardness made Cam feel out of place yesterday, and I really don't want that. Now they're all swimming and laughing. Natty and I finally had to take a break, but everyone else is still having a great time in the water. I'll get lunch ready for everyone in a bit, and then we'll all go out back after that. Gotta remind Cam and Dusty to put more sunscreen on, or they're going to look like lobsters by this evening. Not going to interrupt them now, though. Cam's smiling. I haven't seen him this happy since he got back. Natty will gladly volunteer to put the lotion on his back. She's had a crush on Cam since she was 12. Cam never noticed. He's always been a bit aloof. He might notice this weekend, though. She's 19 now and a lot less subtle than she used to be. If her cut-off jean shorts were any more revealing, she'd be arrested for indecent exposure. That's my Natty. Saturday, March 25th, 1978. Into the Mystic by Van Morrison is playing on the radio. We had a great night last night. You could definitely say that Dusty and I made up. He was more tender than usual. He's always been a good lover, but tender is not a word I would usually associate with it. Mike had luckily brought a whole bag of condoms with him, because Natty and Cam were both naked in the living room floor when I came downstairs this morning. I gave Natty a thumbs up when she ran through to go to the bathroom. She blushed from ear to ear. About damn time, I say. The boys slept in, but once Shannon got up, we girls went out to the lake to trade stories and sunbathe. Apparently Cam's good in bed, which is good to know. Could you imagine how strange it would be if Natty would have told me he was at Terrible Lay? Way to go, big brother. Once the guys got up, we all went out for ice cream at a local shop. While we were there, Dusty found a flyer for a concert nearby. It's basically some folk music at a festival about 45 minutes away at a place called Historic Rugby. Since it's only 15 cents admission per person, we've all decided to ride up and check it out this evening. We got back to the lake and I decided to go ahead and get ready and write in my journal. I can hear everyone else in the kitchen getting lunch ready. I'll head down in a bit. So far, this has been a great weekend. This is just what I had hoped for. Monday, March 27th, 1978. There's no music because there's no radio. I'm sitting in a hospital bed. I woke up a few hours ago. The doctor said I had a couple of broken bones in my right wrist. Everything else is just scratches and bruises. I'm going to try and write down everything I can remember. We went to the festival on Saturday night like we planned. It was kinda neat. They had a lot of crafts on display and the music could be heard all throughout the place. Most of the music had a bluegrass sound, but it was still fun. On our way back to the lake, the panel van broke down. Rugby was up the mountain, and we were stuck on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. Our panel van never broke down, but it had. We waited. We figured that eventually someone else would leave the festival and pass us. We figured we could get a ride or a tow after that. For 5 minutes we waited while Cam kept tinkering under the hood with the engine. But then we heard a strange noise come from the tree line to our right. It was a soft giggle. We all looked over and saw a little kid. He looked about 4 years old with corn blonde hair. He was wearing a pair of dirty shorts and that was it. I heard Mike ask him if he was okay, but the boy just giggled and ran back into the woods. Dusty and Mike took off after him immediately. I yelled for them to come back, but Dusty just yelled back, "What if he's lost or hurt?" I couldn't argue with that, but I didn't like it. After a few minutes of silence, the rest of us decided to run in and see what was going on. I personally was getting freaked out. It was too quiet, and surely we should still be able to hear Dusty and Mike stomping around or yelling for the kid. I remember being grabbed, everything going dark, and smelling a strange chemical smell that made me think of magic markers. Then I was asleep. This next part is hard for me to write, but I'm going to try. I woke up, and there was a burlap sack on my head, but I could feel that I was tied up with my limbs spread out. I also knew I was naked and lying on the ground because the dirt was scratching my back. Finally, I was aware that a man was having sex with me. I began to struggle and pull at the ropes on my wrists and ankles. As soon as I started moving, the bag was removed from my head. I couldn't believe what I saw. Above me was a completely naked man, thrusting in and out of me. The only thing he wore was a mask that looked like a bunny. His eyes were big and stared directly into me. It wore a sick smile that made me feel disgusted. His skin was covered in dried mud that he wore almost like war paint. The only part that wasn't covered in mud was the part that was entering me. Behind him raged a huge bonfire. The sight of that bunny mask smiling down at me with flames licking behind it made me instantly think of hell. I realized that I heard more screaming besides my own. I turned to my left and saw that Natty was in the same situation. It was a different man, but he was also covered in mud and wearing a bunny mask. I looked to my right and saw Cam in a similar situation. He was being ridden by a female, but she was also wearing a bunny mask and covered in the same mud. Cam was looking directly at me. Tears were rolling down his face, and I could see that he was mouthing the words, "I'm sorry," over and over. I yelled that I loved him. I didn't want him to blame himself. I remember that at one point, the guy who was on top of me accidentally got too close, and I quickly lunged forward and bit into his chest as hard as I could. I know it hurt him, but my teeth slipped off of him before I could get a good chunk. He made sure to keep his distance after that, but I noticed something else. The taste. The mud had been raked into my mouth by my teeth, but it wasn't mud, it was chocolate. They were covered in fucking chocolate, not mud. It made no sense. I heard someone yelling out words like a preacher giving a sermon, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I know it was an older woman's voice, but I didn't see where it was coming from. I think she was on the other side of the bonfire. I also heard yells from Dusty, Shannon, and Mike. I could only assume they were in the same situation on the other side of the bonfire. This went on for several minutes. The one on Natty finished first. He didn't pull out of her either. This was something that I had feared. They weren't wearing condoms, and they weren't pulling out. I started to cry more heavily. Cam finished next. I knew he didn't want to. He looked so ashamed. My heart went out to him. I wanted to tell him that it was going to be okay, even though I knew it probably wouldn't. The woman stayed seated on him for several minutes before rising off him. The man on Natty finally rose up as well. Natty was left laying there, tied to the ground, but several men came out of the darkness and untied Cam. They pulled him to his feet and tied him to a post just over where Natty was laying. I finally felt the man inside of me twitch and flex. I knew what was happening. I just kept my eyes on Cam's face. I kept mouthing that it was going to be okay. Cam just looked at me and cried. When the man thrust into me to ejaculate, Cam had to turn away. I don't blame him. I didn't want him to see me like that. A minute later, the man got off me and walked away. A few minutes after that, Dusty was pulled into my sight and tied standing next to a post above me. I also saw Mike being tied to a post a bit away, and I immediately knew he was above Shannon. A robed figure with a dark rabbit mask stepped from behind the bonfire. I knew this was the woman I heard earlier when I saw the long corn blonde hair with touches of silver spilling out of the back of the mask. She mumbled a few more words that I couldn't hear. I looked up at Dusty, who was above me. He was looking down at me, telling me he loved me. I saw a masked man step up behind him with a knife. He didn't see it, but I did. I watched as the man came up behind him and slit his throat. I quickly looked over at my brother to see the same thing happen again to Cam. I felt Dusty's hot blood spray all over my face, neck, and chest. I watched my big brother's blood spill all over Natty's body. I knew Mike was dead too, and Shannon was going through the same horror. I laid there, with my mind on the precipice of oblivion. I couldn't speak. I couldn't close my eyes for more than a second. I just shook my head slightly from side to side as I mumbled to Cam that everything was going to be all right over and over again. I vaguely remember them throwing the men's dead bodies into the fire. I do recall the smell of their flesh burning. I also recall the masked people celebrating. They drank, sang, bucked, and beasted. We laid there for what had to be hours before they came back to us. The woman in robes came up to each of us, and one at a time drew some weird symbol on our stomachs in blood using a severed chicken's foot as her paintbrush. Then they put the burlap sacks back on our heads, and soon I smelled that chemical again. When I woke up again, I was back in the panel van, and Natty and Shannon were with me. Our clothes were back on, but our skin underneath the clothes was still covered in blood and melted chocolate. Shannon couldn't stop sobbing. She just laid in the back, crying in a fetal position. Natalie just stared emotionless out the window. It was like she wasn't really there with us. I went out to the road and waited. Eventually a car came by. Eventually we ended up at a hospital. Eventually the police finished asking us questions. Eventually. This is the last time I plan to tell this story. If they want to ask me again, they can just read this. I don't want to live through it again. Wednesday, May 31st, 1978. We are all pregnant. Monday, January 8th, 1979. It was a boy. I say was because I was just informed that it was taken from the nursery. I don't think I was surprised when they told me. I should have been, but I wasn't. I should tell Natalie and Shannon, but I have no idea where Shannon is. I know where Natty is, Lakeshore Insane Asylum. Maybe she hasn't had her baby yet. Thursday, March 29th, 1979. The Sounds of Silence by Simon & Garfunkel is playing on the radio. Natty's baby was taken as well. Again, I wasn't surprised. I've driven out to the field where the police believe we were raped a year ago. There's a farm here now. The place looks like it's doing well. I've been spying for the last couple of days. There are several kids running around. They all have corn blonde hair. That got me looking closer, and that's when I found it. They have a scarecrow out in their field. They just put it up. It's wearing Cam's jacket. I'm mailing this journal off to my Aunt Jean in Chattanooga. Hopefully I'll write in it again, but probably not. I'm going back down to that farm tonight. I'm going to burn it to the ground, and I'm going to kill anyone who stands in my way. This is for Cam, Dusty, Natty, Shannon, and Mike. I love you all.